Russia could deploy its newest hypersonic intermediate-range missile, Oreshnik, deep inside the Arctic Circle. And if that happens, every early warning system in the Northern Hemisphere changes overnight. And the reason is simple. This is the one place on Earth where a missile launch could appear on radar only seconds before impact. For years, analysts insisted Russia would never use the high north as a real strike platform. Too cold, too remote, too expensive to supply. But the last 2 winters have revealed a pattern that is impossible to ignore. Satellite images showing new excavation lines, construction timelines that don't match aviation needs, and logistics movements that look nothing like a simple airbase resupply. There is no official confirmation Oreshnik is being moved here, but everything happening around Nagurskoye Air Base points to preparations for a missile that can function in polar temperatures. If its propulsion system, airframe composites, and thermal protection truly match the specifications circulating in internal procurement notes. Nagurskoye sits at 82 degrees north, a frozen wedge carved into Alexandra land. On paper, it is still a remote Arctic station. In reality, it has become a fortified launch corridor. The 3,500-meter runway is only one layer. Heated hangars with Arctic-grade composites can shelter vehicles and missile containers that cannot survive minus 50-degree winds. Below them sit semi-buried vaults, large enough for mobile tells, reload containers, and guidance modules, structures too reinforced to exist only for aircraft maintenance. The deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. Thermal satellite data shows underground galleries being expanded every winter. The shapes match no known fuel depot or storage hall. Some Russian engineers who previously worked on subsurface silo designs claim the layout looks suspiciously similar to semi-hardened pop-up launch tubes, a concept Russia prototyped in the 1980s and then quietly shelved. Above ground, defenses have multiplied. Tor M2DT Arctic variants, Pantsir A batteries, S-400 coverage overlapping Northern Fleet arcs, and a radar dome widely believed to house an upgraded Rezonans-N, a system optimized for tracking ultra-fast objects flying along distorted polar trajectories. And then there are the rumors. Patrol flights have reported unusual airframes moving between Arctic test ranges, long, sharp fuselages with aggressive heat shielding. Some believe these are early prototypes related to the long-rumored MiG-41 interceptor, designed to hunt high-altitude threats over the pole. Others think they are decoys, but the timing is impossible to ignore. A new missile, a fortified Arctic base, mysterious aircraft, and a launch corridor where the world's most advanced radars go blind. If Oreshnik can truly operate in this environment, then Russia isn't just upgrading a base. It's building the northern gateway for a new class of hypersonic warfare. Welcome to Military Power. Today we break open Oreshnik itself, the size, the warheads, the propulsion, the strike envelope, and the exact scenarios this missile could execute from the top of the world. To understand what Russia is building in the Arctic, you have to start with the missile itself. Oreshnik, a name almost no one outside Moscow had heard before new procurement documents leaked 2 winters ago. At first, analysts assumed it was another prototype, a derivative, a modernization of an older system, but the signatures didn't match anything known. The thermal trail, the exhaust plume density, the acceleration curve, and most telling of all, the booster imprint detected during a classified test over the Barents Sea. It wasn't a cruise missile. It wasn't a ballistic missile in the classic sense. It was something in between, a compact intermediate-range hypersonic strike system shaped around mobility, Arctic survivability, and a glide profile that looked less like a weapon and more like a scaled-down strategic vehicle. The missile's proportions were the first clue. Roughly 10 to 12 meters long, about 1 meter in diameter, and weighing somewhere between 8 and 11 tons depending on loadout. Too large for a tactical launcher, too small for an ICBM, but perfect for a mobile hypersonic TEL designed to move under permafrost roofs. Engineers who studied the plume signature were confident of one thing. Oreshnik uses a solid fuel booster with extremely fast burnout, the kind of stage you only choose when you need a missile to leap off the launch rail in seconds. In the Arctic, that matters more than anywhere else. You don't get long prep cycles. You don't get clean weather windows. You get a few moments where sensors across the polar arc go quiet. And that's when the missile has to rise. Once that booster clears the atmosphere's thickest layer, the glide body takes over. A low-profile, sharp-chined frame with carbon composites built to survive the kind of thermal punishment usually reserved for strategic glide vehicles. Not quite avant-garde class, but unmistakably cut from the same philosophy. Lateral maneuver, unpredictable terminal direction, and a plasma envelope that distorts radar return just long enough to matter. The body can shift tens of kilometers left or right in terminal descent. Not graceful, but violent enough to break interception logic. Every split-second course change forces the defending radar to refresh the track, and at Mach 8 to Mach 11, refresh cycles become fatal delays. But all of this would be meaningless without the warhead. And here, Oreshnik becomes the most controversial missile in Russia's intermediate-range arsenal. Inside its payload bay sits a modular compartment. The simplest version carries a heavy penetrator, 500 to 700 kilograms of reinforced steel and explosive filler, designed for Arctic bunkers, radar sites, and command hubs hidden beneath concrete and ice. A straightforward weapon, but brutally effective. The next configuration is the one that made Western planners take a step back. A multi-stage cluster package. One carrier warhead releases 6 sub-warheads. Each of those releases a smaller spread of fragments, each designed to slice through aircraft on the ground and pierce fuel tanks, destroy radars, shred logistics hubs. 12, 18, 36 impact signatures, all from one missile. For a defender, it is chaos in a launch container. Then there is the final possibility, mentioned only once in a procurement memo before the line was redacted: a special configuration physics package. In Russian terminology, this is highly suggestive. A 100 to 750 kiloton nuclear device fits the mass envelope precisely. No proof exists, but the engineers who designed the missile certainly left room for it. Range estimates tell another story. Fired from temperate zones, Oreshnik can travel 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers depending on flight profile. Fired from the Arctic, with thinner air and polar routing, it may exceed 4,000, enough to bend strike arcs around radars, enough to reach targets without crossing traditional missile defense sectors until the terminal seconds. Launch methods matter too. Everything at Nagurskoye suggests Oreshnik is built for mobility. Heated TELs stored underground, thermal pre-launch cycles, reinforced pavement ramps where exhaust damage has mysteriously appeared, and excavation lines whose geometry looks suspiciously similar to semi-hardened quick-launch shafts, the kind designed to open once, fire once, and be abandoned. TELs are the backbone, easy to hide, hard to track. Each TEL could roll out, receive a target packet through burst transmission, and fire in minutes. Hot launch, no ejection, solid fuel ignites directly, pushing the missile into a vertical climb before the plume can be triangulated. The missile is just one part of a northern kill chain Russia has quietly built. Rezonans-N radar domes track high-speed objects in the Arctic haze. Northern Fleet satellites feed targeting refinements through secure bursts. Yasen-M submarines beneath the ice relay maritime coordinates through buoy systems that surface for seconds before vanishing. MiG-31BM interceptors sweep the Arctic sky, acting as relay platforms in an area where ground stations freeze. And above everything sits the Aerospace Force's unified command loop, merging all inputs into a single firing decision. A polar launch aimed across Great Circle routes leaves defenders with minimal warning. A coordinated strike could erase remote radar sites in northern Canada, Greenland, or Iceland. A cluster payload could devastate an entire airbase. A wide-angle penetration dive could cripple Arctic ports or energy infrastructure. And a maritime denial strike could hit carrier groups approaching the Barents or Norwegian Sea, with submarines painting targets for the glide body in real time. Then comes the cost. Between $10 and $18 million per missile, $400 to $600 million for a regiment including TELs. 3 times the maintenance cost of temperate deployments due to ice damage, fuel thickening cycles, and heated storage. But still cheaper per shot than Sarmat, more flexible than Avangard, and far easier to hide. The weapon works because of where it can launch. And now that Russia has turned the Arctic into a corridor, Oreshnik becomes more than a missile. It becomes a tool for rewriting what early warning even means. Over the last 15 years, Russia has turned the high north into a fortified arc stretching from the Kola Peninsula to Franz Josef Land, from Novaya Zemlya to the new Siberian Islands. Western analysts like to call it a modernization wave, but that phrase is too soft. What Russia is building is an entire combat ecosystem, designed to operate where almost no other military can survive for long. And the rest of the world knows it. The United States has global power, yes, but the American Arctic is thin. 2 major bases in Alaska, limited icebreaker capability, and early warning radars designed for ballistic arcs, not hypersonic corridors. Canada controls immense territory, but lacks hardened runways. deep Arctic depots, or rapid response assets. NATO's northern members? Norway has excellent submarine hunters and advanced sensors, but it sits downstream, reacting, not shaping. Finland is brand new to the alliance. Iceland has no military at all. In contrast, Russia has spent billions placing assets where no one else even tries. Let's start with the aircraft. People often forget that Russia still operates the MiG-31, the fastest operational interceptor on Earth, and it is specifically built for Arctic patrols. At lower latitudes, it's a museum piece. Up here, it becomes a guardian. Its engines thrive in cold air, its radar sees across vast ranges, and its patrol loops cover thousands of kilometers of polar sky. The idea of forward deploying even a handful of these jets to the Nagurskoye runway is enough to complicate NATO air planning from Greenland to Tromsø. Then there are the unmanned systems. Russia has quietly tested long-endurance Arctic drones, thick-skinned airframes with de-icing systems and oversized fuel tanks. Some are designed for reconnaissance, others for electronic warfare, others for relaying targeting data from satellites to submarines. In a place where fiber routes are fragile and satellites vanish in geomagnetic storms, drones become the transponders of last resort. And the submarines? This is where Russia's advantage becomes most visible. While NATO hunts diesel boats in the Baltic and fusion reactors hum in American ports, Russia's nuclear submarines operate under ice sheets the thickness of buildings. The borei-a SSBNs are already designed to hide beneath Arctic ice fields in what Russian doctrine calls the bastion. Close by, Yasen-M attack submarines carry cruise missiles capable of striking ships and coastal targets from beneath frozen oceans. These boats don't need fair weather, calm seas, or warm water. The Arctic is their home terrain. Place Oreshnik into this environment, and you don't get a missile battalion. You get a strategic complex, a missile that threatens long-range assets, interceptors that defend the airspace above it, submarines that support its targeting and guard the flanks, drones that fill gaps no radar can cover, and surface ships that can operate in polar choke points with Zircon anti-ship missiles. No other country on Earth currently fields this combination above the Arctic Circle. Not the United States, whose future NGAD fighters aren't optimized for the cold, whose submarines seldom operate under deep ice, and whose missile defense grid faces south, not north. Not China, which dreams of the Northern Sea route but lacks hardened Arctic bases. Not Canada, which has territory but limited military reach inside it. Not even Norway or Denmark, whose geography gives them proximity but not infrastructure. This is why Oreshnik alone is not the threat. It is the ecosystem Russia can surround it with. And the ripple effect on U.S. homeland defense is enormous. The Northern Radar Arc, from Thule in Greenland to the North Warning System sites across Canada, was built in the Cold War to detect high-altitude ballistic missiles, not maneuvering weapons flying shallow polar trajectories. When a missile crosses too far north, radars start losing coherence. Add Arctic atmospheric distortion, and a hypersonic glide body becomes a flicker, a signal too brief for automated systems to classify. North American Aerospace Defense Command can see what happens over Alaska. It can see what happens over the Pacific. But the polar top? That is still a wound in its coverage. NATO faces a different problem. Its northern states are on the front line of a domain where Russia has the advantage. Arctic ports, ice-capable ships, long-range air defenses stationed permanently in the polar desert. If Oreshnik becomes part of the inventory, NATO must rethink early warning infrastructure, new radar stations in northern Canada, new satellite constellations, new interceptors capable of reaching hypersonic targets at high latitudes. The alliance has started reacting. Norwegian P-8 aircraft now patrol longer, the UK is examining new radar coverage, the US is upgrading Thule. But none of this closes the gap immediately. At the industrial level, Russia must pay a high price. Everything in the Arctic costs 3 times more: fuel, storage, heated shelters, maintenance cycles. Sanctions complicate component sourcing, and the rail routes feeding Murmansk are overstretched. But Moscow has decided the cost is worth it. Because with each new radar dome, each new tunnel, each new hardened launch bay, Russia tightens its grip over a region everyone else is only now beginning to understand. Every upgrade, every radar dome, every missile shelter Russia builds at 82 degrees north pushes the world 1 inch closer to a new kind of deterrence. One where the first warning might be the last. If you want to follow how this story evolves, what Russia deploys next, how NATO responds, then stay with us. This is military power. Hit like so this video reaches more people who follow real defense technology. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. And tell me in the comments, which other system do you want deep dived next? MiG-41, Yasen-M under ice, or the new S-500?